Bear cub was pinned to a tree by arrows. What this baby did was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The morning sun filtered through the tall pines, casting dappled shadows across the forest floor. Mist hung low between the trees, giving the woodland an enchanted feel. In a small clearing stood a rustic cabin, its wooden walls weathered by time and the elements. The cabin belonged to the Riley family, who had moved to this remote location seeking peace from the hustle of city life. Inside the cabin, 10-month-old Lily Riley sat on a hand-woven rug, her chubby fingers clutching a wooden toy bear her father had carved. Her innocent blue eyes sparkled with curiosity as she explored the texture of the toy, occasionally putting it in her mouth. Her mother, Eliza, hummed softly as she prepared breakfast in the kitchen, keeping an eye on Lily through the open doorway. James should be back soon with more firewood, Eliza said to herself, glancing out the window at the misty forest. James Riley had gone out at dawn, wanting to stock up before the forecasted afternoon rain. Unknown to the Riley family, just beyond the tree line, a young bear cub wandered alone. The cub, with cinnamon-colored fur and curious eyes, had strayed too far from its mother while exploring a patch of wild berries. Its small paws pressed into the soft earth as it sniffed at wildflowers and batted playfully at low-hanging leaves. The peaceful morning was suddenly shattered by hushed voices and the cracking of twigs. 3 men moved through the trees, their camouflage clothing helping them blend into the forest. They weren't locals, but visitors from the city who had come to these woods not for appreciation of nature, but for sport. Cruel sport. "Look there," whispered the tallest one, pointing toward the unsuspecting bear cub. "Perfect target practice." "Marcus, that's just a baby," said another, hesitation in his voice. Marcus sneered. "Don't go soft on me now, Hank. We came here for a thrill. Besides, where there's a cub, Mama Bear won't be far. We'll get our trophy shot." The third man, Rex, already had his bow ready, an arrow nocked. "I bet I can pin it to that oak without killing it," he said with a cold smile. More fun that way. Before Hank could protest further, Rex took aim and released his arrow. It whistled through the air and struck the cub's loose skin near its shoulder, pinning it to the tree. The cub let out a high-pitched wail that echoed through the forest. Its small body squirmed and trembled as it tried to free itself, but the arrow held firm, tearing at its flesh with each movement. Marcus laughed and readied his own bow. "Nice shot. Let me try." His arrow flew true, pinning the cub's hind leg to the tree trunk. The animal's cries grew more desperate, filled with pain and terror. Inside the cabin, Lily's head turned toward the window. The cub's cries reached her ears, and something in that sound touched her deeply. She dropped her wooden toy and crawled to the window seat, pulling herself up to peer outside. Her little face scrunched in concern as the painful wails continued. Eliza had stepped into the root cellar for preserves and didn't hear the cries or notice Lily moving toward the partially open front door. The baby girl, driven by an instinct she couldn't possibly understand, pushed against the door. It swung open easily. James had forgotten to latch it properly before leaving that morning. Lily crawled out onto the porch, then managed to stand and toddle down the 3 small steps to the ground. The cool forest air brushed against her face as she followed the sound of the cub's distress. Her tiny feet carried her forward, one unsteady step at a time, toward a fate that would shock everyone involved. The hunters, too engrossed in their cruel game, didn't notice the small human approaching. Hank had reluctantly added a 3rd arrow, pinning the cub's other shoulder. Blood matted the young bear's fur. its cries growing weaker as strength ebbed from its small body. "Let's finish it," Marcus said, drawing back his bowstring for a killing shot. "Then we can skin it for a nice little trophy." The cub's eyes, glossy with pain, darted around frantically. It was in these desperate moments that its gaze fell upon a small figure entering the clearing. A human baby in a yellow onesie, tottering toward them with determined, if wobbly, steps. No one could have predicted what would happen next. Marcus drew his bow taut, the arrowhead aimed directly at the cub's heart. The wounded animal's cries had diminished to pitiful whimpers, its strength fading with each drop of blood that stained the forest floor. Rex stood to the side, admiring their handiwork with a cold smile, while Hank shifted uncomfortably, his conscience clearly troubled by their actions. "Wait," Hank suddenly whispered, his eyes widening as he spotted movement at the edge of the clearing. "Look!" The three hunters froze as baby Lily emerged fully into the clearing, her tiny legs carrying her with surprising determination toward the pinned cub. The morning sunlight caught in her wispy blonde hair, creating a halo effect around her innocent face. She wore a look of profound concern that seemed impossible for one so young. "What the hell?" Marcus lowered his bow slightly, genuinely confused by the appearance of a human baby in the middle of the remote forest. "Where did that come from?" Rex's face paled. "There must be parents nearby. We need to get out of here." The prospect of being caught in their act of cruelty suddenly made the situation far more complicated. But Hank stood transfixed, watching as Lily approached the suffering cub. "Wait," he said again, softer this time, curious about what the baby would do. Lily's blue eyes never left the cub as she closed the distance between them. The wounded bear, sensing a new presence, turned its head slightly. Instead of fear, a strange calm seemed to wash over the animal as it locked eyes with the approaching baby. There was something in that gaze, something ancient and knowing that transcended species and age. At the cabin, Eliza emerged from the root cellar with a jar of preserved blackberries. "Lily, sweetheart, breakfast is almost—" Her words caught in her throat as she realized the room was empty. The wooden bear toy lay abandoned on the floor, and the front door stood ajar. Panic surged through her body like electricity. "Lily!" she screamed, rushing to the door. Her eyes scanned the porch, then the yard, finding no sign of her baby. "Lily!" Her voice echoed through the trees, birds taking flight at the sound of her terror. Back in the clearing, the hunters heard the distant cry. "That's it, we're leaving," Rex insisted, already backing away. But before they could retreat, something extraordinary happened. Lily had reached the cub and, without hesitation or fear, placed her small hand on its trembling head. The touch was gentle, comforting. The cub, instead of recoiling or lashing out in pain, leaned slightly into her touch, its pained eyes closing briefly. "Jesus Christ," breathed Marcus, his earlier bravado evaporating at the sight. The baby made soft cooing sounds, as if trying to console the injured animal. Then, with surprising determination, she grasped one of the arrows with her tiny hands. The hunters watched in astonishment as Lily tugged at the arrow pinning the cub's shoulder. "This is insane," Rex whispered. "That thing could snap at her any second." But the cub remained still, almost resigned, as if understanding Lily's intentions. The arrow didn't budge under her weak attempt, but her persistence was remarkable. She tugged again, her face scrunching with effort. Unbeknownst to the group, another drama was unfolding deeper in the forest. The mother bear had been frantically searching for her missing cub since realizing it had wandered away. Her powerful body moved with surprising speed through the underbrush, her nose leading her toward the scent of her offspring, and the alarming smell of its blood. At the cabin, James Riley had returned with an armload of firewood to find his wife hysterical. "She's gone, James. Lily's gone," Eliza cried, her face streaked with tears. James dropped the wood immediately. "What? How long?" "I don't know. I was in the cellar for only a few minutes." Eliza's voice cracked with panic. "I heard screaming from the forest." Without another word, James grabbed his rifle from above the door, something he kept for emergencies and had hoped never to use. "Stay here in case she comes back," he instructed, though he knew Eliza would likely ignore this. "Call the ranger station on the radio." He sprinted into the forest, heart pounding with terror and determination, following the direction of the cries Eliza had mentioned. His paternal instinct drove him forward with a speed he didn't know he possessed. In the clearing, Lily had now shifted her attention to the second arrow. The cub watched her with what almost appeared to be trust. The hunters remained frozen, transfixed by the bizarre scene unfolding before them. Hank was the first to break from his trance. Slowly, he approached the baby and the cub. "I can't be part of this," he said quietly. "Look at them. This isn't right." Marcus grabbed his arm. "What are you doing?" "I'm going to help her," Hank replied, shaking off Marcus's grip. "You can leave if you want." As Hank took another step forward, a new sound stopped everyone in their tracks. A deep, rumbling growl that seemed to vibrate the very air around them. From the opposite side of the clearing, the mother bear emerged, her massive form a stark contrast to her cub's vulnerability. Her eyes, dark with fury, took in the scene. Her cub pinned and bleeding, 3 humans with weapons, and strangely, a human cub touching her offspring. The mother bear rose to her hind legs, standing over 6 feet tall, and let out a roar that shook leaves from the nearby trees. "Run!" Rex shouted, turning to flee. Marcus followed immediately, but Hank remained, paralyzed between fear and his newfound determination to right this wrong. The mother bear dropped to all 4s and charged, her powerful legs eating up the distance between them and the clearing. Rex and Marcus disappeared into the trees, their footsteps fading rapidly. Hank closed his eyes, certain he was about to die. But then, something happened that defied all natural explanations. Lily, completely unafraid, turned toward the charging mother bear and raised her tiny hands in a gesture that seemed almost like greeting. And somehow, impossibly, the massive bear slowed her charge, confusion replacing rage in her eyes as she took in the strange tableau, a human baby trying to free her cub. The mother bear stopped just feet away from Lily, sniffing the air cautiously. She growled low in her throat, but it wasn't the same threatening sound as before. Lily babbled in response, patting the air in front of her as if trying to communicate. In this extraordinary moment of suspended violence, James Riley burst into the clearing, rifle raised. The sight that greeted him nearly stopped his heart, his baby daughter standing between a wounded bear cub and its enormous mother, with a terrified hunter nearby. "Lily!" he gasped, his voice barely audible even to himself. He raised the rifle, taking aim at the mother bear, knowing he had only one shot to save his child. But as his finger tensed on the trigger, he witnessed something that made him hesitate. The mother bear wasn't attacking Lily. Instead, she was lowering her massive head, sniffing curiously at the baby who stood fearlessly before her. The mother bear then approached her wounded cub, gently nuzzling it while keeping a wary eye on the humans. The cub whimpered in response, and the sound seemed to renew Lily's determination. She reached for the arrows again, looking up at the mother bear as if asking for help. James kept his rifle trained on the bear, his heart thundering in his chest as he tried to make sense of what he was seeing. Slowly, he began to edge closer, driven by the need to reach his daughter despite the danger. "Don't move," Hank whispered to James, having noticed his approach. Something incredible is happening here." The mother bear, with surprising gentleness, used her teeth to grasp one of the arrows and pulled it free from the tree and her cub's flesh. The cub cried out, but then nuzzled against Lily, who patted its head with innocent compassion. One by one, the mother bear removed the remaining arrows, freeing her wounded offspring. Throughout this process, Lily stood beside the cub, occasionally touching its fur or making soft sounds that seemed to calm both bears. James had now reached the edge of the immediate scene, his rifle still ready, but his mind struggling to process what he was witnessing. As the last arrow came free, the cub collapsed weakly onto the forest floor, bleeding from multiple wounds. Lily, with a determination that seemed beyond her years, placed her small hand on the cub's largest wound and pressed down, as if she somehow understood the need to stop the bleeding. The mother bear watched, still alert, but showing no aggression toward the human child trying to help her baby. "I need to get to my daughter," James whispered to Hank, desperation in his voice. Hank nodded, still pale with fear. I think it's okay. The bear could have attacked by now if it was going to." "What happened here?" James demanded, his voice low and tense. Shame washed over Hank's face. My friends and I, we did this. We pinned the cub for sport. Your daughter, she just appeared and tried to help it." James's expression hardened with disgust, but his focus remained on Lily. "I'm going to approach slowly," he said. "If the bear charges, run and distract it." Hank nodded, though they both knew such a plan would likely end in James's death if the bear chose to protect her cub from further human interference. James took a cautious step forward, then another. "Lily," he called softly. "Lily, sweetie, it's Daddy." Lily turned at the sound of her father's voice, her face lighting up with recognition. She babbled excitedly, patting the cub as if to introduce it to her father. The mother bear tensed at James's approach but didn't move from her wounded cub's side. It was at this moment that Eliza arrived at the clearing's edge, gasping at the scene before her. "James!" she cried out involuntarily. The mother bear's head snapped toward the new voice, and for a terrible moment, everything hung in the balance. Then, something even more unexpected happened. The wounded bear cub let out a pitiful cry, drawing its mother's attention back. The sound seemed to remind the mother bear of the priority. Her injured offspring needed help, and somehow the tiny human was helping. A tense silence fell over the clearing as James inched closer to Lily, his movements painfully slow and deliberate. The mother bear watched him with intelligent eyes that seemed to be assessing his intentions. Eliza remained frozen at the edge of the clearing, her maternal instinct screaming at her to rush to her child, but her rational mind keeping her rooted in place. "That's it, Lily," James whispered, now just a few feet away from his daughter. "Stay still, sweetheart." The cub's breathing had become labored, its wounds still bleeding despite Lily's small hand pressing against them. The mother bear nudged her offspring gently, making soft grunting sounds that carried unmistakable concern. From the direction that Marcus and Rex had fled came new sounds, voices calling, branches breaking. Hank tensed, recognizing the approach of forest rangers. Someone, perhaps Marcus or Rex, had alerted them. "Help is coming," Hank said quietly. "For the cub, I mean." The mother bear's ears twitched at the new sounds, her body tensing again. She seemed torn between staying with her wounded cub and fleeing from more humans. It was in this moment that Lily did something that left everyone breathless. She removed her hand from the cub's wound and tottered over to the mother bear without hesitation. Before James could lunge forward to stop her, Lily had placed her tiny hand on the mother bear's massive paw. The huge animal went completely still, her eyes fixed on the small human child who showed no fear. Lily babbled softly, patting the bear's paw as if to reassure her. Then, with the same innocent determination, she turned and toddled back to the cub, resuming her position with her hand on its wound. It was as if she was telling the mother bear, "I'm helping. Stay. Trust me." "My God," whispered Eliza from the edge of the clearing, tears streaming down her face. James had reached Lily now and crouched beside her, his body positioned to shield her from the mother bear if necessary. But the bear made no aggressive move. Instead, she watched with what could only be described as reluctant trust as James examined the cub's wounds. "It's bad," he said softly to Hank. "These arrows did a lot of damage. The cub is losing too much blood." From his years working as a wilderness guide before moving to the cabin, James had some experience with injured wildlife. "We need to stop the bleeding and get it to a wildlife rehabilitator." The sounds of the approaching rangers grew closer. The mother bear growled low in her throat, clearly agitated by the increasing number of humans. "The mother won't leave her cub," Hank observed, "but she won't let the rangers take it either." "No, she won't," James agreed. Then he made a decision that defied all conventional wisdom about wildlife encounters. "We need to help them both." Carefully, he removed his flannel shirt and tore it into strips. "Hank, go slow and wave the rangers in carefully. Tell them what's happening. We need a wildlife team here immediately." As Hank moved cautiously toward the approaching voices, James began to bind the cub's wounds with the strips of his shirt. Lily remained at his side, occasionally patting the cub's head and making soft cooing sounds. The mother bear watched every move James made, her eyes never leaving his hands as he worked on her cub. When the cub flinched in pain, she growled, but didn't interfere, almost as if she understood James was trying to help. "You're a brave girl, Lily," James whispered to his daughter, his heart swelling with a mixture of terror and pride. "But please don't ever do anything like this again." Eliza had slowly made her way to join them, moving with exaggerated care so as not to alarm the mother bear. When she reached them, she sank to her knees beside Lily, wrapping a protective arm around her while watching James work. "How is this possible?" she whispered, looking from the bears to her fearless daughter. James shook his head slightly. "I don't know. It's like she knew exactly what to do, and somehow the bears sense it." The cub's bleeding had slowed with James's makeshift bandages, but its condition was still precarious. The mother bear began to pace nervously as the voices of the rangers grew closer. Then something happened that added a new layer to the already extraordinary scene. From the edge of the clearing opposite to where the rangers were approaching, a figure emerged. An elderly man with weathered copper skin and long gray hair tied back in a braid. He wore simple clothes and carried a small leather bag at his side. Even the mother bear paused her pacing to regard this new arrival, who moved with steady, unhurried steps toward the group at the center of the clearing. "Joseph," James breathed in recognition. Joseph Eagle Feather was from the Native American community that lived deeper in the forest. The Riley family had met him shortly after moving to the cabin when he'd come to welcome them to the area, explaining that their cabin stood on land that had once belonged to his people. Joseph took in the scene with calm, knowing eyes. "I heard the cries," he said simply as he approached, "both the bear's and your wife's." He knelt beside the injured cub, examining James's bandaging work with an approving nod. Then his gaze shifted to Lily, who stared back at him with curious eyes. "This little one," Joseph said softly, "she has the old gift." Gift? Eliza questioned, holding Lily closer. Joseph nodded, reaching into his leather bag. The seeing heart, the ability to speak without words to our brothers and sisters of the forest. He removed a small clay pot and a bundle of dried herbs. It is rare now, even among my people. The mother bear watched Joseph warily, but didn't interfere as he mixed something from the pot with the crushed herbs. Long ago, Joseph continued as he worked, there were those who could walk among the most dangerous beasts without harm. They were the bridge between humans and animals. He looked directly at Lily. Your daughter's such a bridge. Hank returned with 2 forest rangers who stopped in astonishment at the edge of the scene. Stay back, Hank cautioned them. It's complicated. Joseph applied his mixture to the cub's wounds after gently removing James's bandages. This will stop the bleeding and prevent sickness, he explained. But the cub needs more help than I can give here. The mother bear had grown increasingly agitated with the arrival of more humans. She was now standing protectively near her cub, making it impossible for the rangers to approach. She will not let them take her baby, Joseph said, and separating them would be cruel. The cub would likely die from fear alone. Then what do we do? James asked, still shielding Lily with his body. The cub needs medical attention beyond what we can provide here. Joseph looked thoughtful for a moment, then turned to Lily. Perhaps the bridge can show us the way. Before anyone could question what he meant, Joseph began to hum a low, melodic tune. The sound carried across the clearing, somehow both soothing and compelling. The mother bear's ears twitched, and she tilted her head as if listening. Lily, as if responding to some unheard call, wiggled free from Eliza's protective embrace. Before either parent could stop her, she had toddled to stand directly between the mother bear and the humans. "Lily, no!" Eliza gasped, but Joseph raised a hand to still her. "Watch," he said quietly. "Trust the gift." Lily stood before the enormous bear, fearless and small. She raised her tiny arms as if asking to be picked up, a gesture so familiar to her parents but shocking in this context. Then she turned and pointed toward Joseph's small cabin deep in the forest, visible as just a smudge of smoke rising above the trees in the distance. The mother bear lowered her massive head until her nose was level with Lily's face. The baby reached out and touched the bear's muzzle gently, babbling in her own language. Then, to everyone's astonishment, Lily turned and began to toddle in the direction she had pointed, occasionally looking back as if expecting the others to follow. "She's showing us the way," Joseph said, his voice filled with wonder, despite his years of connection to the forest's mysteries. "The child is asking us to follow her." James scooped up the injured cub as gently as possible, wrapping it in what remained of his shirt. The young bear was too weak to resist, though it whimpered softly at being moved. The mother bear growled at first, but then something remarkable happened. Lily paused and looked back at the mother bear, making insistent, babbling sounds and continuing to point ahead. The massive animal seemed to understand, following behind James as he carried her cub, keeping a cautious distance but not interfering. "I've never seen anything like this," one of the rangers whispered, his hand still resting on his tranquilizer gun but making no move to use it. "Nor will you again," Joseph replied. "What happens here today is a rare gift." The strange procession made its way through the forest. Lily toddling ahead with Eliza close behind her, ready to scoop her up at the first sign of danger. James carrying the wounded cub, the mother bear following at a watchful distance, and Joseph, Hank, and the rangers bringing up the rear. They moved slowly, the fate of the injured cub hanging in the balance with each passing minute. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath around them, the usual chattering of birds and small mammals subdued as if in recognition of the extraordinary covenant being enacted beneath the ancient trees. As they approached Joseph's small cabin, the old man moved ahead to prepare a space for the injured cub. His home was simple but clean, with bundles of herbs hanging from the ceiling and shelves lined with clay pots similar to the one he had used in the clearing. "Bring the cub inside," Joseph instructed James. "The mother will not enter a human dwelling, but she will wait if she believes we are helping her child." James hesitated. "Are you sure? If the cub cries out, the mother might—" "The bridge has shown us the path," Joseph said, glancing at Lily. "We must trust that." Joseph had quickly prepared a bed of soft furs in a corner of the single-room cabin. James carefully laid the injured cub down while Eliza kept Lily in her arms by the door, where the baby could still see the mother bear waiting anxiously outside. Working with practiced hands, Joseph cleansed the cub's wounds thoroughly, applying more of his herbal remedies and proper bandages. "These plants have been used by my people for many generations to heal arrow wounds," he explained as he worked. "Before the white man came with guns, arrows were the way of hunting and war. We learned which plants could draw out poison and close-torn flesh." The mother bear paced outside, occasionally rising on her hind legs to peer through the cabin's windows. Each time she did, Lily would babble and wave at her, which seemed to reassure the anxious animal. Hank and the rangers remained outside, maintaining a respectful distance from both the cabin and the mother bear. The sun had climbed higher in the sky, burning away the morning mist and casting the forest in warm, dappled light. "The cub will live," Joseph finally announced after nearly an hour of careful work. "But it will need many days of rest and care before it can return to the forest." "How will that be possible?" Eliza asked, still holding Lily close. "The mother won't leave without her cub, but we can't keep a wild bear near human habitation for that long." "It's too dangerous." Joseph nodded thoughtfully. "In the old days, my grandfather told stories of injured animals being cared for in special healing lodges deep in the forest, where they could rest safely until they were strong enough to return to their lives." "Do such places still exist?" James asked. "Not as they once did," Joseph admitted. "But I have a place, a small shelter near the hot springs where the soil is warm even in winter. It is far from hunting grounds and human paths. I go there sometimes for prayer and healing." The mother bear had grown increasingly restless outside, her pacing more agitated as the separation from her cub continued. Suddenly, she let out a roar that shook the cabin's windows. Lily squirmed in Eliza's arms, clearly wanting to go to the doorway. Against her better judgment, but trusting in the extraordinary connection they had witnessed, Eliza set her daughter down. Lily immediately toddled to the open door, stopping at the threshold. The mother bear was just outside, her massive form blocking much of the light. When she saw Lily, she lowered her head slightly, making a softer grunting sound. Lily babbled back, patting the air between them. "She's telling her that her baby is going to be okay," Joseph said softly, in her own way. "How can you know that?" Hank asked from where he stood with the rangers. Joseph smiled slightly. "Because I still remember a little of the old language, the one that needs no words." The next few hours were unlike anything any of them had experienced before. Using a travois he constructed from branches and leather, Joseph created a way to transport the sedated cub to his healing place near the hot springs. The mother bear followed the entire way, sometimes disappearing into the underbrush but always reappearing, tracking them by scent and sound. Lily remained with her parents, occasionally catching glimpses of the mother bear through the trees and waving or babbling in her direction. Each time this happened, the bear would pause and seem to listen before continuing her parallel journey. The healing place turned out to be a small, well-constructed lean-to built against a natural rock formation. Steam rose from small vents in the ground nearby, creating a perpetually warm and humid environment. Joseph explained that the minerals in the steam had healing properties, which was why he had chosen this location. "Here, the cub can recover in safety," he said as he carefully arranged a bed of soft grasses inside the shelter. "I will stay with it for the first night to ensure the wound does not fester." "And the mother?" James asked, glancing at the massive bear who watched them from a respectful distance, her powerful body tense but her behavior remarkably restrained. "She will remain close," Joseph said, "but not too close. She knows we are helping, not harming." "Because of Lily," Eliza said, looking down at her daughter who was now sleepy after the long trek through the forest. Joseph nodded. "The gift shows itself differently in each generation. In your daughter, it manifests as a pure connection, untouched by doubt or fear. As she grows, she may lose some of this directness as the world teaches her caution and separation. Or she may become something very special indeed." As they prepared to leave the cub in Joseph's care, Lily insisted on saying goodbye. With her parents watching nervously, she approached the sedated cub and gently patted its head before placing a baby kiss on its ear. The gesture was so tender, so innocent, that even the hardened rangers looked away, moved by the simple compassion. The mother bear, watching from just beyond the small clearing, made a soft huffing sound. Lily turned toward her and waved. To everyone's amazement, the mother bear raised one massive paw and moved it from side to side, a gesture that unmistakably mirrored Lily's wave. "I've never seen anything like that," one of the rangers whispered. "Bears don't wave." "They do to Lily," James said, his voice filled with wonder and a father's pride. As they made their way back toward the cabin, leaving Joseph to tend to the cub under the watchful eye of its mother, Hank approached James and Eliza. "I need to apologize," he said, his face etched with shame. "What we did, what I was part of, was cruel and senseless. I'll be turning myself in to the rangers for poaching and animal cruelty." "What about your friends?" Eliza asked, her tone cool. Hank's expression hardened. "They ran, but I'll give their names to the authorities. They need to face consequences too." The rangers had already taken statements from everyone and documented the incident. They confirmed that charges would be filed against all 3 hunters, though they acknowledged that Hank's decision to stay and help would likely be taken into consideration. As they reached the Riley cabin, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows through the trees. Lily had fallen asleep in her mother's arms, exhausted by the day's events. Her small face was peaceful, one hand still clutching a tuft of bear fur she had collected during her extraordinary encounter. "What happens now?" Eliza asked quietly as she laid Lily in her crib. James stood beside her, watching their daughter sleep. "I don't know, but I think our lives just changed in ways we couldn't have imagined." Outside, in the gathering dusk, a shadow moved at the edge of the clearing. The mother bear, who had followed them all the way back to ensure her cub's savior returned home safely. She rose briefly on her hind legs, silhouetted against the sunset, before disappearing back into the forest to return to her own vigil over her healing cub. Over the next several weeks, the story of Lily and the bears spread throughout the region. Local newspapers picked up the tale, though most dismissed it as exaggeration. Few could believe that a baby had intervened in such a dangerous situation with such extraordinary results. Joseph visited the Riley cabin regularly, bringing news of the cub's recovery. "He grows stronger each day," he reported. "The mother comes to the healing place every evening, and the cub greets her through the shelter walls. Soon they will be reunited." Lily would always grow excited at these updates, babbling and pointing to the wooden bear toy her father had carved, as if making the connection between it and the real cub she had helped save. The day finally came when the cub was strong enough to return to the wild. Joseph invited the Riley family to witness the reunion, though he cautioned them to watch from a distance. "The mother has shown remarkable restraint," he explained, "but she is still a wild bear with protective instincts." They arrived at the healing place just as dawn was breaking over the mountains. Joseph had removed part of the shelter's wall, creating an opening through which the cub could leave when it was ready. The mother bear was already there, waiting at the edge of the small clearing, her nose testing the air currents for her offspring's scent. When she spotted the humans, she rose briefly to her full height, assessing them, before dropping back to all fours and focusing on the shelter. Joseph spoke soft words in his native language, a blessing or prayer that seemed to float on the morning air. Then he stepped away from the shelter and joined the Rileys at a respectful distance. For several long moments nothing happened. Then, slowly, the bear cub emerged from the shelter. Its wounds had healed, leaving only slight patches of fur missing where the arrows had pierced its flesh. It stood uncertainly in the shelter's entrance, blinking in the early light. The mother bear made a soft grunting sound. The cub's head snapped toward her, and with a burst of energy, it bounded across the clearing to its mother. The reunion was touching to witness. The mother bear nuzzling her cub all over, checking for injuries while the cub pressed close to her, clearly overjoyed to be back with its parent. "Beautiful," Joseph murmured. "The circle is complete." In Eliza's arms, Lily watched with wide, fascinated eyes. She reached out one small hand toward the bears, making her familiar babbling sounds. The mother bear paused in her inspection of her cub and looked directly at Lily. For a long moment, bear and baby regarded each other across the clearing, two mothers' children bound by an inexplicable connection. Then, to the amazement of the watching humans, the mother bear once again raised her paw in that strange, unmistakable waving gesture, before turning and leading her cub deeper into the forest, both disappearing among the ancient trees. Lily waved back enthusiastically, bouncing in her mother's arms. "Did you see that?" Eliza whispered, tears in her eyes. She remembered, she recognized Lily. Joseph nodded, his weathered face solemn. "And she will remember always, as will her cub, as will the forest itself." James put his arm around his wife and daughter, humbled by what they had witnessed. "I think Lily just made some lifelong friends in these woods." "More than friends," Joseph corrected gently. "Family of a different kind. The boundaries we see between species are sometimes more fluid than we believe." He looked at Lily with profound respect. "Your daughter reminds us of this ancient truth." As they made their way back to the cabin, the forest seemed different somehow, more alive, more aware. Birds sang more sweetly, and the dappled sunlight through the canopy created patterns that seemed almost like messages written in light and shadow. Lily fell asleep on the journey home, her small face peaceful, one hand still raised as if waving to unseen friends among the trees. "What does this mean for her future?" Eliza asked quietly as they walked. "This gift Joseph speaks of?" "I don't know," James admitted. "But I think our job is to protect it, to let it grow naturally without forcing it one way or another." Joseph, walking slightly ahead of them, looked back with a smile. "The gift comes with responsibility, for her and for you as her parents. The animals will know her now. They will seek her out when they need help, and she will feel called to respond." "Is that safe?" Eliza asked, concern evident in her voice. "Safer than you might think," Joseph replied. Those with the true gift are protected in ways we cannot always see or understand. He gestured to the forest around them. She has made allies here today that will watch over her for many years to come. As they reached the edge of the clearing where their cabin stood, a flash of movement caught their attention. A young fox paused at the tree line, regarding them with intelligent eyes before dipping its head in what could only be described as a bow. Then it, too, vanished into the underbrush. "See?" Joseph said softly. "The word spreads already. The one who speaks without words. The one who bridges worlds." He touched Lily's sleeping head gently. "The one with the seeing heart." In her sleep, Lily smiled, as if hearing and understanding everything, as if her dreams were filled with running alongside her forest friends, free and fearless under the ancient trees, her heart speaking a language as old as the world itself. 3 months passed since the extraordinary day when Lily had bridged the gap between humans and bears. Summer had given way to early autumn, painting the forest in vibrant reds and golds. The Riley cabin looked different now. James had built a secure fence around the property, not to keep the wildlife out but to keep their increasingly mobile daughter in. Lily, now 13 months old, had mastered walking and was constantly trying to toddle off into the woods at every opportunity. "She's drawn to it," Eliza remarked one crisp morning as she watched Lily pressing her face against the fence pickets, staring into the forest with longing. "It's like she hears something calling her." James nodded, sipping his coffee on the porch. "Joseph says it's normal for those with the gift. The forest speaks to them." The incident with the bears had changed their lives in unexpected ways. The story had indeed spread, though most dismissed it as an exaggeration. However, it had caught the attention of a wildlife researcher from the State University, Dr. Miranda Chen, who had reached out asking to interview the family. She was studying unusual human-animal interactions and had been intrigued by the ranger reports. "Are you sure about this meeting today?" Eliza asked, glancing at her husband. "What if she thinks we're crazy? Or worse, what if she wants to turn Lily into some kind of research subject?" James put his arm around her shoulders. "Joseph says doctor. Chen is respectful. She's worked with indigenous communities before and understands there are things science hasn't fully explained." He kissed Eliza's forehead. "Besides, we can always ask her to leave if we're uncomfortable." As if on cue, the sound of a vehicle approaching came from the dirt road that led to their cabin. Lily immediately turned from the fence, her eyes bright with excitement at the prospect of visitors. Dr. Chen's SUV pulled up beside the cabin. She was a petite woman with short black hair streaked with premature gray and wire-rimmed glasses that gave her an owlish appearance. Despite the academic credentials that hung around her neck on a lanyard, there was something approachable about her as she climbed out of her vehicle, a leather satchel slung over her shoulder. "Mr. and Mrs. Riley," she called, waving as she approached. "I'm Miranda Chen. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." As introductions were made, Lily watched the newcomer with unusual intensity. When Dr. Chen knelt to greet her, Lily didn't respond with her typical baby babble. Instead, she reached out and touched the woman's face with serious concentration, as if reading something written there. "Well, hello to you too, Lily," Dr. Chen said with a warm laugh. "I've heard quite a lot about you." Inside the cabin, over tea and homemade bread, Dr. Chen explained her research. "I'm studying what we call interspecies empathic phenomena. Essentially, unusual connections between humans and wild animals that defy conventional scientific explanation." "Like what happened with Lily and the bears," James said. Dr. Chen nodded. "Exactly. Though I have to admit, your case is one of the most extraordinary I've encountered. Most of my research subjects are adults who've developed these connections over years of working with animals. Not babies who wander into bear encounters." Eliza added with a nervous laugh. Precisely, which is why I'm so interested. Dr. Chen took a sip of her tea. I've reviewed the ranger reports and spoken with Mr. Eagle Feather, but I'd like to hear directly from you what happened that day. As James and Eliza recounted the events, Lily played on the floor nearby with her wooden toys, occasionally glancing up as if following the conversation. When they described the mother bear's wave, Dr. Chen's eyebrows rose. Remarkable, she murmured, making notes. And you're certain the gesture was deliberate? Not just a random movement. It was a wave, James confirmed. As clear as if you or I had done it. Dr. Chen looked thoughtful. There have been documented cases of great apes using human gestures after prolonged exposure to humans, but a wild bear doing so spontaneously. She trailed off, writing something else in her notebook. Joseph, Mr. Eagle Feather, says Lily has what his people call the seeing heart, Eliza ventured. He says it's a gift that appears sometimes in certain individuals. Yes, many indigenous cultures have terms for this phenomenon, Dr. Chen agreed. The Inuit have a concept called umajuk, those who can speak with animals. In parts of Africa, they're called beast whisperers. Science has been slow to investigate these claims, but my research suggests there may be neurological and physiological markers associated with these abilities. Lily had lost interest in her toys and was now staring out the window, making soft sounds that weren't quite words. Has she displayed any other unusual behaviors with animals since the bear incident? Dr. Chen asked. James and Eliza exchanged glances. Well, James began, there was the fox I mentioned that seemed to bow to her. And lately, birds have been landing unusually close when she's outside. They don't seem afraid of her. And the ravens, Eliza added. There's a pair that visits our yard almost daily. They've left small objects for her. A shiny stone, a blue feather, once even a lost earring that must have belonged to a hiker. Dr. Chen leaned forward, clearly intrigued. Gift-giving behavior in corvids is documented, but usually only with humans who feed them regularly. Do you feed these ravens? No, James replied. They just started coming after the bear incident. Suddenly, Lily stood up and pointed urgently at the window, making insistent sounds. All three adults turned to look. Outside, at the edge of the forest beyond the fence, stood Joseph Eagle Feather, and beside him was something that made Dr. Chen gasp, the mother bear and her cub, now much larger than it had been 3 months ago. My God, Dr. Chen whispered, reaching for her camera. Is this normal? No, James said, already moving toward the door. They've never come this close to the cabin before. Lily was practically bouncing with excitement, trying to pull herself up to the door handle. Wait, Dr. Chen said sharply. Let me join you, but please, move slowly. Avoid direct eye contact with the bear and keep Lily secure. Outside, Joseph raised a hand in greeting. He stood calmly, seemingly untroubled by the massive bear at his side. The cub, now more of a juvenile, was exploring the edge of the clearing, but stayed close to its mother. Joseph, James called softly as they stepped onto the porch. Is everything okay? Yes, the old man replied, but we bring news and a warning. Eliza held Lily tightly, though the baby squirmed to be put down, her eyes fixed on the bears with unmistakable recognition and joy. Dr. Chen remained slightly behind the family, her camera forgotten in her hand, as she witnessed the improbable tableau before her. The forest is changing, Joseph continued, his voice carrying clearly across the yard, Strangers have come with machines and maps. They mark trees and drive metal stakes into the ground. James's expression darkened. Loggers? Perhaps. Or those who seek what lies beneath the soil. Either way, they do not respect the old boundaries. The mother bear made a low sound, and Joseph nodded as if in agreement. Yes, she has seen them too. They carry weapons and have already frightened away many of the deer from the eastern valleys. Is it legal? Eliza asked. I thought this area was protected forest. Boundaries, on paper, mean little to those driven by greed, Joseph replied. I have contacted the tribal council and the Forest Service, but bureaucracy moves slowly. Dr. Chen had finally found her voice. Mr. Eagle Feather, are you suggesting the bear came to warn you about this development? Joseph's weathered face creased in a slight smile. Dr. Chen, I presume? Joseph Eagle Feather. He nodded in greeting before answering her question. The mother does not think in human terms of warning. She knows only that her territory is threatened, and she remembers that this little one, he gestured to Lily, helped her cub when it was in danger. The circle of debt and gratitude runs deep in nature. The cub had approached the fence now, sniffing curiously. Lily reached out toward it, making happy sounds. The mother bear watched attentively but made no move to interfere. It remembers her, James said softly. Of course, Joseph replied. Bears have excellent memories, especially for those who have shown them kindness or cruelty. The mention of cruelty brought to mind Hank and the other hunters. What happened with the men who hurt the cub? Eliza asked. The poachers? The one called Hank served community service with the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, Joseph informed them. He has found a better path. The others paid fines, and one served 30 days in county jail. Dr. Chen had been quietly observing the interaction, her scientific mind clearly struggling to reconcile what she was witnessing with her understanding of wild animal behavior. The proximity of the mother bear to humans without defensive posturing or signs of aggression is unprecedented, she finally said, especially with her offspring present. Some things exist beyond the boundaries of current science, Dr. Chen, Joseph replied gently, though I welcome your efforts to expand those boundaries. The mother bear suddenly raised her head, nostrils flaring as she tested the air. A low growl rumbled from her chest, and her cub immediately scurried back to her side. Someone approaches, Joseph said, his expression growing serious. Someone not welcome. In the distance came the sound of an engine, louder and more aggressive than Dr. Chen's SUV had been. Joseph quickly moved away from the bears, who retreated several paces into the forest but remained visible. A large black pickup truck with oversized tires and tinted windows came barreling down the access road, kicking up dust as it skidded to a stop beside Dr. Chen's vehicle. The driver's door swung open, and a tall man in expensive-looking outdoor gear stepped out. His clothing was pristine, as if he'd just purchased it from a high-end outfitter, and the logo embroidered on his jacket showed a stylized tree being cut in half. Clearwater Timber and Minerals, James read aloud, his voice hardening. What do you want? The man approached with an artificial smile, holding a leather portfolio. Good morning, folks. Name's Richard Blackwood, Senior Acquisitions Manager for Clearwater. His eyes swept over the group assembled on the porch, lingering for a moment on Joseph before returning to James and Eliza. I was hoping to have a word with the property owners. That would be us, James replied coolly. What's this about? Blackwood's smile widened. Opportunity, Mr. Riley, pure opportunity. Our company has identified this region for a major development project, and your land is, well, Let's just say it's in a strategically valuable location. Development project, Eliza repeated, holding Lily closer. What kind of development? A revolutionary eco-resort and wellness center, Blackwood replied smoothly, as if reciting from a script. Luxury accommodations nestled in pristine wilderness with minimal environmental impact, plus a small-scale sustainable timber operation to help manage forest health. Joseph made a soft scoffing sound. There is nothing sustainable about what your company does, Mr. Blackwood. Blackwood's smile faltered slightly as he looked at Joseph. I'm sorry, and you are. A concerned citizen, Joseph replied evenly, one who knows that Clearwater Timber's definition of minimal impact still leaves deep scars on the land. Blackwood cleared his throat uncomfortably before turning his attention back to James and Eliza. As I was saying, we're prepared to make a very generous offer for your property. More than generous, actually. He opened his portfolio and extracted a document, holding it out. Take a look at the figure on the bottom line. James didn't reach for the paper. We're not interested in selling. You might want to at least look at the offer before. We're not interested, Eliza repeated firmly. This is our home. Blackwood's friendly demeanor began to slip. I understand your attachment to the place, but you should know that Clearwater has already secured options on most of the surrounding parcels. This development is moving forward with or without your participation. Then it'll have to be without, James said. The mother bear chose that moment to emerge fully from the forest edge, rising to her full height on her hind legs. From this position she was an imposing sight, over 6 feet tall with powerful limbs and a massive head. Blackwood's face drained of color. Is that a... He stumbled backward, nearly falling. Jesus Christ, there's a bear! Dr. Chen couldn't suppress a small smile. Very observant, Mr. Blackwood. That's Ursus arctos horribilis, a grizzly bear. A mother with her juvenile cub, to be precise. What the hell is it doing here? Blackwood demanded, his voice rising in pitch as he continued to back toward his truck. Aren't you people concerned? Joseph's expression remained serene. She lives here, Mr. Blackwood. This has been bear territory for thousands of years, long before it was marked on your company's maps as a development opportunity. The mother bear dropped back to all fours and took a few steps forward, her gaze fixed on Blackwood. Her cub stayed close behind her, peeking around her massive form with curious eyes. Get in your truck, Mr. Blackwood, James advised calmly. Move slowly, don't run, and don't come back to our property without an invitation. Blackwood needed no further encouragement. He backed all the way to his vehicle, fumbled with the door handle, and practically threw himself inside. The truck's engine roared to life, and he executed a hasty 3-point turn before speeding back down the access road, gravel flying from his tires. Once the sound of his engine had faded, Joseph chuckled softly. I believe the mother found a good way to communicate her feelings about Clearwater Timber's plans. Dr. Chen was shaking her head in amazement. The timing of that appearance, it was almost as if she understood exactly what was happening. Joseph finished for her. Perhaps she did, in her way. Lily had been unusually quiet during the confrontation, but now she squirmed in Eliza's arms again, pointing toward the bears and making urgent sounds. I think she wants to say hello, Eliza said, looking uncertainly at Joseph. Is it safe? Joseph considered for a moment. The mother has shown remarkable restraint around humans since the day your daughter helped her cub. But she is still a wild bear with a wild bear's instincts. He thought for another moment. Bring Lily to the fence, no closer, and let us see what happens. With James at her side, Eliza carried Lily to the fence line. The mother bear watched their approach, her posture alert but not aggressive. The cub, showing less caution, bounded right up to the fence. Lily reached through the pickets, her small fingers just inches from the cub's nose. The young bear sniffed curiously, then made a soft huffing sound that seemed almost like a greeting. "Extraordinary," Dr. Chen whispered, now recording the interaction on her phone. The cub displays none of the fear responses typical of wild bears encountering humans at close range. "They're not strangers," Joseph said simply. "They are family of a sort." The mother bear approached the fence now, moving with deliberate caution. She stopped just short of where Lily's hand protruded through the pickets. For a long moment, bear and baby regarded each other, and something unspoken seemed to pass between them. Then, once again, the mother bear raised her paw in that strange, unmistakable waving gesture. Lily squealed with delight and waved back enthusiastically. "I can't believe what I'm seeing," Dr. Chen murmured. "This defies everything we understand about ursine behavior." Joseph smiled. "Perhaps it is time to revise what you understand, Doctor." The moment was interrupted by the distant sound of more vehicles approaching. The mother bear immediately tensed, and with a soft grunt to her cub, both retreated back toward the forest edge, though they didn't disappear entirely. "More company," James said, frowning toward the access road. 2 Forest Service trucks came into view, followed by a tribal police vehicle. The small convoy pulled up in front of the cabin, and several uniformed officers emerged. "Mr. Eagle Feather," the tribal officer greeted Joseph with respect. "We got your message about the boundary markers." One of the Forest Service rangers stepped forward. "We've been tracking Clearwater's activities for weeks. They've been operating right on the edge of their permitted area, and we suspect they've been crossing onto protected land under cover of darkness." "The man from Clearwater was just here," James informed them. "Blackwood, I think he said his name was. Tried to pressure us into selling our land." The tribal officer's expression darkened. "Richard Blackwood has a reputation. His company has been cited multiple times for violations on tribal land in other states." "What exactly are they looking for here?" Eliza asked. "He mentioned timber, but—" "Minerals," Joseph said grimly. "Copper, primarily. Their eco-resort is merely cover for a mining operation." Dr. Chen joined the conversation. "If they're planning a copper mine, the environmental impact would be devastating for this watershed. The acid drainage alone could poison the entire ecosystem." The Forest Service ranger nodded. "Which is why we need your help, Doctor." "Chen, we understand you're here studying wildlife behavior, but your expertise in environmental impact assessment would be valuable for building our case against Clearwater." "Of course," Dr. Chen agreed immediately. "I'd be happy to lend my assistance." The tribal officer turned to James and Eliza. "Mr. and Mrs. Riley, your property may become central to this dispute. Clearwater will likely increase pressure on you to sell. They've used some questionable tactics in the past." "What kind of tactics?" James asked, a protective edge in his voice. "Nothing openly illegal, usually. Just harassment, constant visitors, noise at night, convenient accidents that make living in targeted properties uncomfortable." Eliza held Lily closer. "They wouldn't dare." "They might," the officer said honestly. "Money is a powerful motivator, and there's a lot of it in copper mining." From the forest edge came a low, rumbling growl. All heads turned to see the mother bear still watching the proceedings, her powerful form partially hidden among the trees, but her presence unmistakable. The forest ranger stared. "Is that the grizzly sow from the report? The one involved in the incident with your daughter?" James nodded. She and her cub have been visiting occasionally. Without showing aggression, the ranger seemed incredulous. That's highly unusual behavior. Dr. Chen stepped forward. That's precisely what I'm here to study, Ranger. The unique interspecies dynamics that have developed between the Riley family, particularly their daughter, and these bears represents an unprecedented opportunity for wildlife behavior research. Joseph had been quiet, listening to the exchange, but now he spoke. Perhaps the mother's presence is not a coincidence. Perhaps she understands more than we realize about the threat Clearwater poses to her territory. The tribal officer nodded slowly, respecting Joseph's perspective. Either way, having a mother grizzly with territorial interest in this area complicates Clearwater's plan significantly. Protected species laws would make development much more difficult if we can document regular grizzly activity here. Which is exactly what I propose to do, Dr. Chen said, a hint of excitement in her voice. With the Riley's permission, I'd like to set up some wildlife cameras around the property. If we can document the bears' regular presence, especially their unusual non-aggressive interaction with humans, it could provide powerful leverage against Clearwater's plans. And if Blackwood or his people come back? Eliza asked, concern evident in her voice. Document everything, the ranger advised. Record conversations if possible, and call us immediately. He handed James a card. Direct line to our enforcement division. The tribal officer added his own card. Tribal land borders your property to the north. If you have any trouble, our patrols can be here within 15 minutes. As the officials discussed strategy, Lily had grown restless in Eliza's arms. She kept pointing toward the forest where the bears remained partially visible, making insistent sounds that seemed to carry more urgency than typical baby babble. "What is it, sweetheart?" Eliza asked, bouncing her gently. Lily's response was to point more emphatically and make a sound that, to everyone's surprise, was recognizably similar to the mother bear's low grunt. Joseph watched this with intense interest. "She is trying to tell us something," he said quietly, "something the mother has communicated to her. You can't seriously suggest the bear is sending messages through a baby," the forest ranger said skeptically. Dr. Chen, however, looked thoughtful. "Actually, infant brains are remarkably plastic. They haven't yet developed the filtering mechanisms adults use to organize sensory input. Some research suggests they may be more receptive to nonverbal forms of communication that adults have learned to ignore or dismiss." Joseph smiled slightly. "A scientific way of describing the seeing heart, Doctor." Lily was becoming increasingly agitated, her face reddening with frustration as the adults failed to understand her urgent communication. "Maybe we should," James began, but he was interrupted by the distant sound of machinery. Heavy equipment moving through the forest from the direction opposite to the access road. The mother bear rose on her hind legs again, her attention fixed on the noise. The cub pressed close to her legs, suddenly fearful. "They're already started," the tribal officer said grimly, reaching for his radio. "That sounds like earth-moving equipment near the North Ridge." "But that's protected land," the forest ranger protested, already moving toward his vehicle. "I don't think Clearwater Timber is particularly concerned about boundaries," Joseph observed dryly. As the officials hurried to respond to this new development, Lily suddenly twisted in Eliza's arms with surprising strength, nearly causing her mother to drop her. When Eliza tightened her grip, Lily began to cry. Not her usual fussy cry, but a sound of genuine distress that cut through the chaos of the moment. "What's wrong, baby?" Eliza asked, alarmed by the intensity of Lily's reaction. Joseph approached them, his weathered face concerned. "May I?" he asked, holding out his arms. After a moment's hesitation, Eliza allowed him to take Lily. The old man held the baby with practiced ease, looking into her eyes with serious attention. "What do you see, little one?" he asked softly. "What are you trying to tell us?" Lily stopped crying immediately, her tear-stained face suddenly solemn as she met Joseph's gaze. She pointed again toward the forest and made a series of sounds, not random babbling, but sounds with a distinct pattern, almost like words in a language none of them understood. Except, apparently, Joseph. His expression changed, first to surprise, then to deep concern. "What is it?" James asked, stepping closer. "Can you understand her?" "Not exactly," Joseph replied, "but I recognize patterns. The old language sometimes comes through in fragments." He looked toward the mother bear, who was now pacing anxiously at the forest's edge. "The mother is trying to tell us something through Lily, something urgent." Dr. Chen looked torn between scientific skepticism and the undeniable strangeness of what was unfolding before her. What is she trying to communicate?" Joseph listened as Lily made the sounds again, then closed his eyes briefly. "Danger," he finally said, "but not just from the machines. Something else, something worse." He opened his eyes, his expression troubled. "Fire?" As if confirming his interpretation, the mother bear let out a roar that echoed through the clearing. She rose once more on her hind legs, her powerful form silhouetted against the forest, before dropping down and hurrying her cub deeper into the woods. "Fire?" James repeated, alarm spreading across his face. "But there's no—" He was interrupted by the forest ranger, who was jogging back from his vehicle, radio in hand. "Just got word from dispatch. Clearwater's equipment threw sparks that caught in the dry underbrush on the north ridge. With this wind, it's spreading fast." Eliza gasped, instinctively reaching for Lily, who Joseph gently returned to her arms. "How far away?" "Less than 2 miles and moving this direction," the ranger replied grimly. "We need to evacuate, now." The peaceful autumn day had suddenly transformed into a nightmare scenario. The forest that had seemed so welcoming, so alive with wonder, was now potentially their greatest threat. "Get what you need, quickly," the ranger instructed. "We have maybe 30 minutes before the fire reaches this clearing." As James and Eliza rushed inside to gather essentials, Dr. Chen began loading her research equipment into her vehicle. The tribal officer was on his radio, coordinating with emergency services. Joseph remained on the porch, his gaze fixed on the horizon, where a faint smudge of smoke was now visible against the blue sky. His weathered face held an expression of deep sadness and resignation. "You knew," James said as he emerged from the cabin with a hastily packed bag. "Somehow, you knew this was coming." Joseph nodded slowly. "The signs have been there. The forest has been too dry, the animals too restless, and Clearwater's greed knows no bounds." He sighed heavily, "But I did not expect it so soon." Eliza appeared with Lily and another bag. "We're ready," she announced, though her voice trembled slightly. The ranger was directing everyone toward the vehicles when Lily suddenly began crying again, the same distressed wail they had heard before. She twisted in Eliza's arms, reaching desperately toward the forest. "Lily, please," Eliza begged, struggling to hold her increasingly agitated daughter. "We have to go." Joseph stepped closer, studying Lily's face intently. "She is not afraid for herself," he said quietly. "She fears for others." "The bears?" James asked. Joseph shook his head slightly. "Not just them. There is more." Dr. Chen, who had been loading the last of her equipment, suddenly called out, "Look, at the forest edge." They all turned to see a remarkable sight. The mother bear had reappeared, but she wasn't alone. Behind her, emerging cautiously from the trees, came a procession of forest wildlife. Deer with their fawns, a pair of foxes, several raccoons, and even a small bobcat. They moved with visible anxiety, some casting glances back toward the north where smoke was now thickening. "My God," the forest ranger breathed. "They're evacuating too. The fire must be spreading faster than we thought." Joseph's expression was grim. "These are just the first. More will come, seeking escape." He turned to the ranger. "The southern fire break, is it still maintained?" The ranger nodded. "Forest Service cleared it this spring. It should hold if the wind doesn't shift." "Then that is where they will go," Joseph said, gesturing to the animals. "The old migration route to the river valley runs along that break." Lily had stopped struggling and was watching the procession of animals with solemn attention. The mother bear paused at the edge of the clearing, rising once more to her hind legs as if surveying the scene. Her cub stayed close, visibly frightened by the smell of smoke that was now detectable even to human noses. Then, to everyone's amazement, the mother bear looked directly at Lily and made a series of grunting sounds. The baby responded with similar vocalizations, an impossible conversation unfolding before their astonished eyes. "What in God's name?" the ranger muttered. Joseph's expression was one of wonder despite the dire circumstances. The old stories speak of this, children who could hear the voices of the forest, but I never thought to witness it myself. After this brief exchange, the mother bear dropped back to all fours and continued south, her cub at her side. The rest of the animals followed, creating a strange procession that disappeared into the forest. "We need to go," the ranger insisted, gesturing toward the vehicles. "The access road to the east is our best evacuation route." James helped Eliza into the Forest Service truck with Lily, then turned to Joseph. "Are you coming with us?" The old man shook his head. "Number I must go south, along the fire break. There will be animals trapped, confused. I may be able to help guide them." "That's too dangerous," the tribal officer protested. "The fire will follow its own path," Joseph finished, "as must I." He looked at Lily, who was watching him from her mother's arms. "The little one has reminded us that we are caretakers, not just of our own kind, but of all who share this forest." He smiled slightly. "Besides, I am not as fragile as I appear." Before anyone could argue further, he turned and began walking purposefully toward the southern edge of the clearing, following the path the animals had taken. "We can't just let him go alone," Dr. Chen said, concern evident in her voice. The tribal officer hesitated, then made a decision. "I'll go with him. The old trails through that section are confusing. He could get lost, even with his knowledge of the land." He turned to the ranger. "Get them safely to the evacuation center in town. I'll radio when we reach the river valley." With no time for lengthy goodbyes, the group separated. Joseph and the tribal officer heading south while the others piled into the remaining vehicles. As they pulled away from the cabin, Lily pressed her small hands against the window, her eyes fixed on the retreating figure of Joseph Eagle Feather. Her expression was solemn, almost adult in its intensity. The drive to town was tense, with the ranger frequently checking in on his radio for updates on the fire's spread. The smoke was visible now as a dark smudge spreading across the northern sky, and emergency vehicles passed them heading toward the blaze. At the evacuation center, a high school gymnasium in the nearest town, chaos reigned as other families from remote properties arrived seeking information and safety. James and Eliza found a quiet corner where they could set up a makeshift bed for Lily using blankets provided by volunteers. "What will happen to our home?" Eliza asked quietly as they watched Lily, who had finally fallen into an exhausted sleep. James put his arm around her shoulders. I don't know, but we'll face it together, whatever comes. Dr. Chen joined them, having set up her laptop at a nearby table. I've been reviewing the footage I captured today, she said, her voice reflecting both scientific excitement and human concern. What happened with Lily and that bear? I've never seen anything like it in all my years of research. Joseph called it the seeing heart, Eliza said softly, stroking Lily's hair as she slept. He said it's a gift that appears sometimes in certain people. Whatever it is, Dr. Chen replied, it's remarkable. The level of interspecies communication she displayed goes beyond anything documented in scientific literature. A commotion near the entrance to the gymnasium drew their attention. The tribal officer had arrived, his uniform smudged with soot, but his expression triumphant. James hurried to meet him. Joseph? Is he? He's fine, the officer assured him. Currently helping the wildlife authorities set up a temporary sanctuary for displaced animals in the river valley. He shook his head in wonder. I've never seen anything like it. Animals that would normally avoid humans or attack each other were following him like he was some kind of modern St. Francis. And the fire? Eliza asked, joining them with Lily still asleep in her arms. The officer's expression grew more serious. It jumped part of the northern containment line, but they're holding it at the ridge. Your cabin is in the path, though. I'm sorry. The news hit hard, though it wasn't unexpected. James nodded slowly, accepting the reality of their situation. What about Clearwater? Their equipment started this mess. Already under investigation, the officer replied with grim satisfaction. And not just for the fire. We found evidence they were operating well outside their permitted area, and initial water samples show contamination from their test drilling. He smiled slightly. They'll be facing federal charges by morning. A small victory, perhaps, in the face of their personal loss, but it offered some measure of justice. As they discussed next steps, Lily stirred in Eliza's arms, her eyes opening slowly. Instead of the confusion or fear one might expect from a baby waking in strange surroundings, Lily seemed perfectly calm. She looked around the gymnasium with curious eyes, then pointed toward the large double doors that led outside. "What is it, sweetheart?" Eliza asked gently. Lily made an urgent sound and continued pointing. Something in her demeanor compelled them to investigate. "Let's see what she wants," James suggested, leading the way toward the doors. Outside, the evening sky was tinted orange from the distant fire, and the air smelled faintly of smoke. The evacuation center's parking lot was filled with vehicles, and emergency personnel hurried back and forth with supplies and information. Lily became more excited as they stepped outside, squirming in Eliza's arms and babbling insistently. "I don't understand, baby," Eliza said, her exhaustion evident. "What are you trying to tell us?" And then they saw it. At the far edge of the parking lot, partially hidden in the shadows between two large emergency vehicles, stood the mother bear. Her cub was beside her, both looking somewhat bedraggled but unharmed. "Oh my God," Dr. Chen whispered, instinctively stepping closer to James and Eliza. "They followed you here. That's over 15 miles from your cabin." The tribal officer had reached for his radio but paused, watching the extraordinary scene unfold. The mother bear made no aggressive moves. Instead, she seemed to be waiting, her intelligent eyes fixed on Lily. "She's come for a reason," James said quietly. "This isn't random." Lily was practically bouncing in Eliza's arms now, making soft cooing sounds that sounded eerily like the bear's own vocalizations. "We should alert animal control," the officer said uncertainly. "A bear this close to town is dangerous, regardless of its past behavior." "Wait," Dr. Chen urged. "Look at her body language. She's not displaying any pre-aggressive posturing. She's calm, deliberate." As they watched, the mother bear raised her massive paw in that now familiar waving gesture. Lily responded immediately, waving back with enthusiastic babbles. Then the bear did something even more remarkable. She nudged her cub forward slightly, and the younger bear cautiously approached. When it was about 20 feet away, it stopped and deposited something on the ground from its mouth. Something small that glinted in the emergency lights illuminating the parking lot. "What is that?" Eliza wondered, squinting to see. James took a few careful steps forward, then stopped in amazement. It's our spare house key, the one we keep under the stone by the garden." He looked back at the others in disbelief. How could they possibly... Dr. Chen's scientific mind was visibly struggling with what she was witnessing. This defies explanation. Bears don't understand the concept of keys or property. "Perhaps not in the way we do," came a familiar voice from behind them. Joseph Eagle Feather approached, his clothes smudged with ash but his steps as steady as ever. "But they understand value and meaning. They understand gratitude." The mother bear's attention shifted to Joseph, and she made a series of soft grunting sounds. The old man nodded as if in understanding. "She and her cub were near your cabin when the fire approached," Joseph explained. "They found shelter in the root cellar. The stone walls protected them from the worst of the heat. When they emerged, they found this." He gestured to the key on the ground. "Something with your scent, something from your home." "But why bring it here?" the tribal officer asked, his hand still hovering near his radio. Joseph smiled slightly. "To tell you that something remains, that all is not lost." As if confirming his interpretation, the mother bear made another series of sounds. Lily responded with her own babbles, reaching toward the bears with such insistence that Eliza had to adjust her grip to prevent dropping her. "She wants to go to them," Eliza realized aloud, her voice a mixture of fear and wonder. "She won't hurt her," Joseph said with quiet certainty. "The bond between them transcends ordinary boundaries." James and Eliza exchanged a long look, a silent conversation between parents weighing impossible choices. Finally, James nodded slightly. "Together," he said softly, "we'll approach together." With James at her side, Eliza carried Lily forward slowly. The mother bear remained perfectly still, watching their approach with those deep, intelligent eyes. Her cub pressed against her side, curious but cautious. When they were about 10 feet away from the bears, Eliza hesitated. This close, the sheer size and power of the mother bear was overwhelming. One swipe of those massive paws could be deadly. Lily had no such hesitation. She reached out with both arms toward the bears, making soft, insistent sounds. In that moment of suspended tension, Joseph stepped forward to join them. "Trust," he said simply. "Trust what you have seen with your own eyes. Trust what your daughter knows in her heart." With a deep breath, Eliza took the final steps forward until they stood just feet away from the massive predators. Lily was practically vibrating with excitement, her small body leaning toward the bears. The mother bear lowered her head slightly, bringing her face level with Lily's. For a breathless moment, human and bear regarded each other up close, ancient wildness meeting innocent wonder. Then Lily did something that made everyone gasp. She leaned forward from her mother's arms and placed her tiny hand directly on the bear's broad forehead. The touch was gentle, fearless, and somehow profoundly meaningful. The bear closed her eyes briefly at the contact, a rumbling sound emanating from her chest that wasn't quite a growl, something softer, almost like a purr. "My God," Dr. Chen whispered, recording the unprecedented interaction on her phone. This changes everything we understand about interspecies communication. After a moment that seemed suspended in time, Lily withdrew her hand and settled back in Eliza's arms. The mother bear opened her eyes and looked at each of the humans in turn before focusing on Joseph. "She has a message," the old man said softly, "for all of us." The bear made a series of sounds, and Joseph listened with intense concentration. When she finished, he nodded slowly. "She says the forest will heal, but it needs time and protection. She says her kind and ours can share this land if we remember how to listen." He looked at Lily with a smile. "And she thanks the little one with the seeing heart for teaching us how to hear again." With a final soft grunt, the mother bear turned away. Her cub lingered for a moment, its eyes fixed on Lily as if memorizing her face, before following its mother. Together, they padded silently across the parking lot and disappeared into the darkness beyond, heading back toward the distant mountains. A profound silence fell over the small group as they processed what they had just witnessed. "I never would have believed it if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes," the tribal officer finally said, his hand falling away from his radio unused. Dr. Chen was reviewing the footage on her phone, her face alight with scientific wonder. "This documentation will revolutionize our understanding of animal cognition and interspecies relationships. The implications are enormous." But James and Eliza weren't thinking about scientific implications or ecological significance. They were looking at their daughter, their extraordinary, impossible daughter, who had somehow bridged a gap between worlds that most humans never even recognized existed. "What does this mean for her?" Eliza asked softly, stroking Lily's hair as the baby yawned, apparently untroubled by the monumental nature of what had just occurred. "For her future," Joseph considered this question carefully before answering. "It means she will walk between worlds, seeing what others cannot, hearing what others have forgotten how to hear. It means she carries an ancient gift in a modern time." His weathered face creased in a gentle smile. "It means she will never be alone in this forest, even when no humans are near." "And our home?" James asked, picking up the key the cub had delivered. The officer said it was in the fire's path. Joseph's smile deepened mysteriously. "Perhaps you should see for yourselves tomorrow. The fire's path is not always what we expect." The next morning, escorted by Forest Service vehicles, they returned to their property expecting to find devastation. Instead, they discovered a miracle. While the surrounding forest showed clear signs of the fire's passage, blackened trees and scorched earth, a perfect circle around their cabin remained untouched. The boundary was so precise it seemed almost drawn with a compass. Burned forest on one side, green grass and untouched trees on the other. The forest rangers were baffled, checking and rechecking their maps of the fire's spread. "It's like the flames just went around your property," one said, shaking his head in disbelief. "I've never seen anything like it." As the adults discussed the inexplicable phenomenon, Lily toddled happily around the yard, occasionally stopping to touch a flower or listen to a bird's call with unusual concentration. Dr. Chen, who had accompanied them back to the property, was meticulously documenting everything with her camera. "The fire boundary corresponds almost exactly with the territory the mother bear and her cub have been frequenting," she observed. "It's almost as if they protected it," Joseph finished, watching Lily explore. Perhaps they did, in their way. At the edge of the clearing, fresh bear tracks told a story of their own. Large paw prints circling the property perimeter repeatedly, as if something had paced the boundary as the fire approached. Life gradually returned to a semblance of normalcy in the weeks that followed. Clearwater Timber faced multiple federal charges and eventually abandoned their development plans entirely. The forest began its slow recovery, with new growth already appearing amidst the burn scars. Dr. Chen established a research station nearby to study the unique wildlife dynamics of the area, particularly focused on the extraordinary relationship between Lily and the forest's inhabitants. Her initial papers on the subject, though cautiously worded, caused a sensation in the scientific community. Joseph became a frequent visitor to the Riley cabin, sharing his knowledge of the forest and its ways with Lily as she grew. Under his guidance, her gift flourished, not diminishing as she developed language and other human skills, but deepening, becoming more refined. The mother bear and her cub returned to their wild ways, rarely approaching the cabin directly, but often visible at the forest's edge, especially when Lily was playing outside. Sometimes the mother would rise on her hind legs and wave, and Lily would always wave back, laughing with delight. On Lily's second birthday, James built her a special chair that sat on the cabin's porch, facing the forest. Carved into its back was a simple image, a child and a bear, paw and hand touching across the space between their worlds. That evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of lavender and gold, the Rileys sat on the porch enjoying the peaceful end to the day. Lily, in her special chair, babbling happily to the forest, as if in conversation with unseen friends. From the deepening shadows at the tree line came a response, a soft, rumbling sound that carried clearly across the clearing. Lily clapped her hands in recognition and waved enthusiastically toward the sound. "What does she say?" Eliza asked softly, having learned to trust these mysterious exchanges. Lily, whose vocabulary was growing daily, turned to her mother with eyes that somehow held both the innocence of childhood and the ancient wisdom Joseph had recognized from the beginning. "Family," she said clearly, pointing toward the forest where the silhouettes of the mother bear and her now adolescent cub were just visible in the gathering dusk. "All family." James and Eliza exchanged glances, understanding now that their decision to build a life in this remote forest had led to something far more profound than they could have imagined. Their daughter would indeed walk between worlds, but she would do so with the fierce protection of the forest itself, and with the love of a family that extended far beyond the boundaries of species or human understanding. As darkness fell, the bears melted back into the forest, and stars appeared one by one in the clear night sky. Lily finally allowed herself to be carried inside to bed, her small face peaceful with the absolute certainty that she belonged exactly where she was, at the threshold between worlds, with her heart open to the ancient voices most had forgotten how to hear. And in the forest beyond, the mother bear settled into her den with her growing cub, equally certain of the strange but unbreakable bond forged in a moment of compassion between species. A bond that had changed not only their lives, but the very meaning of family in this small corner of the wild world. Some called it a miracle, others a scientific anomaly. Joseph Eagle Feather simply called it the way things were always meant to be. The circle completed, the ancient covenant between humans and animals remembered once more, through the seeing heart of a child who wasn't afraid to reach across the divide.